and Sebastian Trese. Sebastian worked in our office 21 years ago, so a big circle is closing. And two other circles which are closing, the one is my dear friend Vittorio Döse, who's teaching here at this university since 1999 in philosophy, who went to school with me, and my mother went to college here in 1951. So a lot of circles. Now I'm finished. I want to talk to you about 4 projects: urban design and architecture. We see a strong connection between these two disciplines. And the first one is Master Plan Potsdamer Leipziger Platz, I mentioned it, which we won in 1991, and was kind of the foundation of the gluing together of the middle of Berlin. Let's start with this incredible plan which Hans Stimmer, the former Senate's building director, made. It's a ground figure plan, you might know. It's not No, it's much better, I think. Yeah, it's the ground figure plan showing the middle of Berlin. Here is the big Tiergarten. Here's the Museum Island. This is the Schloss, the nucleus of the city. These are the Linden, Brandenburger Tor, going west, the Tiergarten. And you must know that the city line after the Napoleonic Wars was here. So that was the west where the city was spreading. And this is the situation Berlin 1940, before any bomb has fallen, between Bahnhof Zoo and Hauptbahnhof. So this is the nucleus of Berlin. And in a more detailed plan, we see this area, Potsdamer Platz, which was the commercial center of Berlin before the city was destroyed and later was divided. We see the Straße unter den Linden, which refers to the Schloss. We see the southern part of Old Berlin, which is a block structure, you know, and we have here the places which lead to the west, the Pariser Platz with a square, the octagonal Leipziger Platz, very similar to Place Vendôme in Paris, and then here the different blocks extending from that point. And this place was called the busiest corner of the world before the First World War. These are views from a balloon. These two pavilions are from Schinkel. You look to the west and you see the conventional 5-story building height of Berlin of 22 meters, referring to the fire brigades. It's a nice detail. Gilly wanted the monument for Frederick the Great in the middle of the Leipziger Platz, which was never built. You know, Gilly was the master teacher of Schinkel. And this is the most shocking plan you've ever seen in your life, because all the blue buildings are not existing after 1945. So more than 70% of all the buildings have been destroyed by the Second World, by the bombardments, by the fighting. And from them, what you see in black, even more than half disappeared later because they were not really, they were partly demolished and taken away. So it was a vast area between these two halves of not only of Berlin, of Germany, of the world. When we see here, you see the octagonal of the Leipziger Platz. This is East Berlin. There is the frontier, which was in '61 then transformed into the wall, and then was West Berlin. So it was all vast and destroyed. It has a similarity to Hiroshima. And during the existence of the wall, more and more of these buildings were taken away. So when the wall then fell in 1989, there was a big international competition with 16 architects to be invited, not urban planners, only architects, and which we had the luck to win. And and the image we took for convincing then after winning the competition, the people, was this painting you know, of the Renaissance, which Francesco di Giorgio Martini attributed, which shows a modern Renaissance city. You probably know it. It consists, it's only a part of the big painting. It has a place in the middle where a public building should be. We have different streets, a wide street, a small street. We have a building height which is not to be exceeded. This building stays a little lower, and you can read the functions of the buildings, which are individually built, but they form together an ensemble. They form a choir. You know, you see, we have public functions here. This is more private. This is a private garden even, but they all together take up the spirit of a city, and that was our idea. That was the winning plan. We took up the block. We first reconstructed the Leipziger Platz completely, which was at that very time completely vanished. So we said we built up the Leipziger Platz as it was with a building height of 22 meters, but we added a new, and all the other buildings around here are under the 22-meter line. But as the client, the city of Berlin, asked a very high floor ratio of 4.5, which is very, very high for German relations. I don't know what the floor ratio in New York City, in Manhattan is. It's probably a little higher, but similar. We reached only this floor ratio by a building height of 35 meters. So we said we have an average building height of 35 meters, and it relies on the principle of the block and the street and the small street, like the painting of Francesco di Giorgio Martini. What we also have is we have very little high rises. We don't believe in the high rise, although we have built a few and we know how difficult it is. We have only a minimum floor area in the high rise and the maximum in the blocks. We also had a church to be integrated, which was not program of the competition. We have a wide area here of a green or of a water. So we take up the structures of West Berlin, we take up the structures of East Berlin, and wonderfully enough, in the end of 1991, the plan was accepted by the authorities, and 14 years later, the city looked like that. We didn't believe ourselves, but it was built in that very way. This is one of our inspiration fathers. It's an extension of Vienna, of Otto Wagner, who believes in the same principle: the block, the limiting line, the public space, the streets, the grid. The grid provides the wind going through. We have special buildings in the axis. So referring on good colleagues shows you that you're only one in a long row of colleagues, and it convinces other people more than, because we haven't done anything bigger or similar like that. This is a study what a block can do. 50 by 50 meters, 35 meters high. It can house 10 floors. It can house an internal spacious glassed room. It can have a theater in it. It works to almost everything. And you must imagine that this competition was done in a time where the computer was not introduced in the office. So people were sitting there with paper and pencils, and the computer was invented later. So when we proposed that, the clients said, well, it's a conventional city. You're doing what Haussmann did 140 years ago. And we said, yes, we are doing that, exactly that, because we don't know what's going to happen next. And you know, Haussmann started Paris and the car was not invented yet. And the car came and the city survived. Yeah? And we didn't know that the computer would come, but you must know that building of high-rises in Germany is much, much more complicated. And that's why we have done so little in that direction. This is the model of our proposal. And if you compare it to the model of the other people, this was the most moderate and conservative model. This again here, you see the Leipziger Platz, the structure of the southern Friedrichstadt. You see the Pariser Platz. You see the big Tiergarten. Here's Mies van der Rohe's National Gallery. Here's Karlsbad and the Landwehrkanal. This is what Daniel Libeskind proposed. This is serious, it's not a joke. I sometimes will say, come on, Thomas, stop that joke. This is what Daniel Libeskind proposed. And I think he got a third prize or something like that, just to say, well, thank you, Daniel, you were there. But you are professional enough that I don't comment it. This was what Hans Kollhoff did. A friend of us and a colleague, and he proposed 10 towers, 200 to 250 meter high. And that was, for that time, much too much, because our towers were finished 10 years or 12 years after the competition was won. And he was more enthusiastic in his proposal, but he did not. It didn't work for him. This is the idea how we see the city. You have the block 35 meters. You have the wideness of the street of 17.5 meters. So this is the relation 1 to 2. You look over the park, and the street continues there. So you are in a closed system. There's a saying of Adolf Loos, the great Austrian architect: you must pass a city, you must pass a building without noticing it. It must have been Selbstverständlichkeit, self-evident. Thank you, Julia. This is a view outside from a building over the park, seeing 2 other buildings. Not exciting. Architecture must not be exciting. It's having functions, and a special building like a church or museum can be a little more exciting, but altogether that's a problem of the architecture of the 20th century, that everyone wants to be more excited than the other, and it finishes sometimes in chaos. And this is how it looks today. We are in a helicopter looking from north to south. So this is the Leipziger Platz. We got through that. All the first 6 floors are offices, and the top floors are housing, which a strong idea was put in the B plan, so that 20% of all the built floor area are housing projects. Unfortunately, this one house turned to be done in a dark color. We all wanted it in one color. You know, we wanted to make it like Haussmann, but that was not the power we had. This is the big public park which we had with a water covering that was changed a little bit, which is very normal in a democracy, because the master plan is just kind of the first idea. This is the area of Sony with this very futuristic roof of Helmut Jahn. This is the quarter of Daimler-Benz, which was done by Renzo Piano. This is the so-called A&B area, which was done by different architects. We did that, and I'll talk about that later. And this is the so-called Beisheim Center. So the whole quarter is divided into 6 smaller quarters connected by streets. And it's a wonder that it all went so incredibly fast. Like, I think in China they are going this speed right now. But altogether, we didn't want to be that so much different from the rest of the city. You know, we couldn't avoid these 5 high-rises and the one over there. But in the average, it should be an integrity, a part of the huge existing urban system of Berlin. Yeah, this is a rendering looking to Leipziger Platz, which existed in that form very similar before 1945. This is the interior of this Sony Center, which is not our cup of tea, as we say. But the idea was at that time, you know, we invent investors and architects of other continents, Japanese, you know. And if you ever have been to Japan, which is a marvelous country, they have another relation to public space. And the thing is, Helmut Jahn did that. It's very loud because the roof is reflecting. It's not inside, outside. But this is what when you do it in an international frame, you know, it's this is the Beisheim Center. This was done, is the last quarter which was developed. It was at least this part, the behind part, was bought by a German billionaire, Otto Beisheim, who wanted a hotel and a few office buildings. And we were lucky enough to win this competition too in the year 2000, when we then got this high-rise and this office building to build. This is the detailed plan of the Beisheim Center. The Beisheim Center includes this block here. This black building, this gray building was before done by Hans Kolloff, who will come here too, the colleague with the high-rise proposal. And what we did within our plan, our original plan, said this street runs through here, as all streets run through to give better ventilation. But as the hotel, the Ritz-Carlton, which is in here, was so big, we had to shift this street for 15 meters, and this shift was done. It was done without any harm. So we have a small internal place of the quarter where these buildings look on. So we have the building height of 35 meters here, and this high-rise has the same height like that, which is 75 meters. So this was the drawing we did, the hand drawing. I was very convinced when I saw what hand drawings are done here in this school. This is a hand drawing by my colleague Christoph Sattler. You see the high-rise has a strong attitude of being very horizontal, very vertical, because we built in corners and bay windows for every hotel suite. And this is how it looks now. This was an image we were giving in. This is it's a competition for Chicago Tribune Tower by Sullivan. No, not by Sullivan, by Eero Sarin's father, who was an architect too, which is a very vertical building. It's not the building which was built then for Chicago Tribune, but we said we want to refer to the big time of high-rises of the 20s. So this is the 35-meter part, and this is the high part of 75 meters for the hotel, for the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, for the tower. It was a very, very fast project. We won the prize, the competition in August 2000, and the inauguration was 3.5 years later, which was speedy, and but that's what architects like: speed and pressure. That gives the thing. The hotel tower stands for 50% on a tunnel. That's a topic you are dealing with your design class too, that in a city you have a lot of things which are not visible: underground railways, underground subways, and so on. And the problem of the chance was here that this was a new tunnel for the south-north connection of the German railway system, for the big new central train station. So the tower, which stays here on the tunnel, has the effect that this tunnel is sinking 2 centimeters. So the rest of the foundation here for the tower had to be done in a way that it's also sinking 2 centimeters. If that was sink 10 centimeters, the tower would look crooked, but it all was working well. So we had good engineers. Thanks God that's not a thing we have to do. This is the facade, and you see four other high rises. This is a high rise of Renzo Piano, which is very glass steel construction. This is the tower of Hans Koloff, which is a brick construction, and our tower is of a limestone, of a Portuguese limestone, and it has light setbacks when you see it detailedly, which are referring naturally to the Gothic cathedral and to the early high rises of the 20th century. We were lucky enough that the lower part, the lower 10 meters of the high rise were done in bronze. We took the client and went to New York and told him, here in New York, you see all the great high rises have in their lower floors, in the first 10 meters, they have bronze. You have to do bronze too. And he said, as long as these are not bronze and as long as the costs are not exploding, we will do that. And we were lucky enough to do that. So yeah, that's a part of the facade. You have granite there where the water is sprinkling up when it's raining. These are the first 10 meters with the bronze structure, and then the body of the building starts. You have these setbacks, you have these Chicago windows, and we have a detail. We are proud that we detailed that to the final drawings, that the detailing of the windows in the part where the building is 75 meters high, it's very vertical, whereas the detail in the part of the building where it's only 35 meters, the detail here is horizontal. Yeah, this is the top of the building. We like letters, letters are part of architecture. You can't change them because it's 20 centimeters deep. You know the big story of the Pan Am Tower in New York, which was sold and the writing was removed, and it now has MetLife in a very ugly writing. You can't remove this, that's done in the limestone, and there's put gold in it, so you have a very significant thing. This is, by the way, this is the building of Hans Koloff. He also put ceramic sculptures on top of them, and which you can buy in a shop. It's very distinctive. Yeah, I like it very much. Yeah, this is the entrance. It's the building must express, I am a very fine hotel. I don't write the name because I'm so elegant. You know it or you don't know it. Yeah, the Ritz-Carlton people are of that kind. If you don't know what it is, then it's not a Ritz-Carlton. So make it as elegant as possible. And we were lucky that it works now. This is another building we did on Leipziger Platz. It's very small. It's only 18 meters wide. This is 22 meters, and this is 35 meters. So we have, again, bronze here. It's another client. We have 5 floors of offices, and we have 4 floors of housing. And we convinced them that we need this very organic form. We wanted to create a very detailed, a refined facade, which is clearly seen to be modern, but only to the second view. In the first view, you should feel, well, I know this building somewhere, I've seen it somewhere. And as it's a similar limestone like the Ritz-Carlton building. And and as the curve goes in here, the curve goes out with the balcony line. So there are different forms which are repeated and changed, and also it's not very clear. It has an unclearliness. You see, we have 3 bays here and we have 4 bays here. So we have a kind of a friction, You know that from music, yeah. There are sometimes pieces from Bach where you have 3 notes in the right hand and 4 in the left hand. You see, I'm a piano player. Well, this is the detail of the facade. As this is the facade to the Leipziger Platz, this is a precious facade. The facades which go to the back side to the other streets are not so precious. Yeah, they're more simple. Well, now I come to a building which is also very similar to the seminar what Julia is giving. This is a helicopter shot to Potsdamer Platz looking north. And what we see here is that a train is coming up here. It's a U-Bahn, the oldest U-Bahn of Berlin, which was started in 1895, and it's going underground and it's coming up here and it's ending here in a train station, which we did in the late 90s. And this site was then covered with a wideness of 60 meters and 210 meters in the length. It was all covered by buildings, which I will describe. And another thing which happens rarely, but in a construction like that, beside the U2 U-Bahn metro, there is a zone which is kept free for another train system which is not existing, which will come in future. So this this railway line will run to the Hauptbahnhof, which is up here, and will run in the other direction to the airport. It will be a fast train, the so-called S21, and you have to keep this tunnel for this future system to come. That makes the building very complicated because it's 60 meters wide. You have 10 meters here, you have 15 meters here, and in between it's an empty space. So it's a lot of construction, and the function of the building, of this building, is it's a housing project. It's one of the 20% housing of Potsdamer Platz. This is a hotel, and this is a housing project too. I will just talk about this housing project, and you see it's covering the train station. Here we have the Landwehrkanal. Here's a train just arriving, a yellow train, and here we have the public park. Yeah? This is a section which shows the complexity of the building. It's the last building which was built on Potsdamer Platz. The construction was started in 2016, which is 25 years after the B plan was started. We are looking south, so we have at first the 4 tunnels for the train system, which runs from north to south, which goes underground for 3.5 kilometers. And as this tunnel turns to the left, the foundation here is a very complicated one. Then here's the train station, which we have to incorporate in the design. And this is a S21 space, which has to be kept free. So how do we manage a housing project which makes you a cozy home, which has a fantastic location, but which is not easy to reach? So the system is, we have a 10-meter wide walkway here, and we proposed a cart here in a double height, which gives an urban situation. And the client all said, okay, it's so difficult, let's do that too. So you enter here, you have a doorman, which is a rare thing in Berlin. You have an elevator, you go up here to this level, which is about 12 meters over street. And on this level, we have a kind of a patio, like in a cloister, you know, where you have a fountain, you have water, you have green, it's absolutely quiet, and you go through these columns to your entrance. Yeah? This is the floor plan in 12 meters height. You arrive here with this elevator. We proposed 2, the client just built 1, and you have this axis here, and when you enter here, you feel it's a symmetric building that's very good for orientation. Symmetry helps you. You know, we are built almost symmetrical as people, and that helps you. So we have 4 staircases, and you have here this cloister system. You have the green, and when you are up here, you don't listen the noise of the street, of the traffic, and you can easily go to your apartments. And you see from the division line, we have altogether 204 apartments. So it's a big apartment block. Now this is again a shot from the helicopter. You see here the train station. It's still under construction, and you see the density of 4.5, which is reached on this level. We normally don't do curved edges, but not more than 1 kilometer away is this famous building by Emil Fahrenkamp from the 20s, the so-called Shell building, which has a copy in New York. You might know that. There's a story that an American officer came to Berlin after in the Second World War, saw it, became architect, and enlarged it. And as this is such a famous thing with these curves looking to the river, we took that motive and used it here for the building. The building is done also again in limestone. We love limestone because it has an attitude to be similar to the human skin. It's friendly. It's easy to work with, and it's a stable situation. We have the bronze here. It's not a real bronze. It's a painted bronze. It's a so-called tiger coating, and the building has a balcony, an inbuilt balcony at the corner. So this helps us that we didn't have to build a window with a curve, because curved windows are extremely expensive. You know, it's a thing we have to obey. This is the arcade, which has a height of 6.5 meters, and it gives an urban context, an urban situation. This is the detail. We said it's very important that you have a nice detail which you can touch, and when you come as a human being to this corner, you immediately touch it and say, okay, that's a nice round thing. And this is the inner corner, you know, it's the inner corner, which only exists 2 times. And yeah, we are happy that we succeeded in that. And as the building is so high, and we have the Landwehrkanal and the street where people stay in the morning in the traffic, we put this clock on top of it. That gives the only thing of humor we ever built in a building. But when people are waiting and say, I'm late to drive to the western part of Berlin, they can look on this clock and see, well. So this is the courtyard then in 12 meters high. You see it has a nice walkway, you have hedges, you have trees. The photo was done in the first year, so the trees are relatively small, and you have a atmosphere which is very special. You know, the 2 blocks have a different size, so you can. It's not totally symmetric, and this is a nice fountain. When you get there, everyone touches the water. You know, when you come there, walk to the city, and then finally you have this fountain. You love to come to another mood. So, well, that's how it looks from the bridge leading to the Daimler-Benz Areal, and this is the view where you see the train station, which was covered to the most part of it, and so it's very urban. You have water, you have train, you have cars, you have a park. You have everything, every difficulty you have in the city. Yeah. The second is another project we did in the middle of a city. It's Lembachgärten in Munich. Yeah. So this is an aerial view of Munich. You know, this is the old historic medieval form of the city with Marienplatz. And after the Napoleonic Wars, the city was enlarged to the north, and to this situation here, the Königsplatz by Leo von Klenze, a classicistic, crazy idea. You know, the Napoleonic Wars had the effect that all the kings of Europe came to Paris and watched Paris and saw that what they have done to the Louvre, they formed it into a museum. And by that, the museums were founded in all the city. So this were two museums which were founded in 1828. Let me go back. In 1828, the Antikensammlung, the collection of antiques, and the so-called Glyptothek by Leo von Klenze and Gärtner, and this propylene tower, classicistic, was kind of the strongest statement of classicism in Germany in the early 19th century. And as these two museums build a strong axis through the city, we took up the axis when this area here, what you see here, was completely new developed. That is a photo before the competition was done. So this is our winning project, which orients on this small park, which I saw today in your class, Julia. It takes up this axis. This is the museum. In the axis of the museum, there's a Catholic church, and this was the block to be developed. We proposed a hotel, a Roccoforte hotel with a curved form. We proposed housing, which is laying on the axis. This is housing 2, and the brown things are offices. So it's a mixture of hotel, offices, housing, 50% housing, 50% the rest. All the traffic is underground, so you just walk through or take your bike. So it's a very modern, very concentrated, high-profile project, which a small developer in Düsseldorf started. This is the construction site, and we see here the axis of this classicistic place which runs through the construction site, and the axis is being taken up here by the church and which runs through the building. And when the building is finished, you will see in a later picture, you can look through here, through the whole thing. This is the hotel with the curve. The curve relates to the park, and curves make buildings, as we learned, much more expensive. But expensiveness is also a thing which people love when they have to use the buildings, you know. This is the finished Roccoforte hotel with this light curve. The radius is about, I think, 80 meters. So the windows are not curved, but it closes this part of the city, and it refers strongly to this 19th century architecture, which is based on brick walls, plaster, and wood windows. We have metal windows, we have bronze here, but we believe in the wall. We don't believe in the curtain wall, with the glass curtain wall. People want to feel at home in a hotel. They don't want to live in a glass box or something like that. This is the facade of the hotel. You see the similarity to the balconies I showed you on Leipziger Platz. So as the curve goes that way, the balcony curves go in another direction. This is a drawing for the housing project. It's a doorman project, which is on the left side of the hotel, and there's an underground connection from the housing project to the swimming pool of the hotel, so the pool can be used by both parties. And hand drawings are easy because you don't fix to every level, and the client can use his own imagination, and it has a kind of artistic freedom. You know, this is the corner between the hotel and the housing project. You see the so-called McKinsey building, so the office building. This is a walkway through, so it's only for the fire brigade, and in normal things, if there's no fire, which happens rarely, these walkways are just used by pedestrians and bicycle man. You see the coloring again, all in bright limestone. Here also limestone in the upper part, plaster. You know, this is the entrance of the block, of the Nortman block, and as you see here, we tried a kind of a capital. You know, it's not a Greek capital, but it's referring to a form which has a classicistic attitude, because this entrance and the whole building is grounded on the axis leading to the museums. This is the courtyard of the housing project of the Max Palais. It's called Max Palais because the king who built the site was the museum site was Max I Joseph. As you see, the cloister courtyard is a system we used in the other project too. So when we have developed a system, we reuse it again and again. You know, there's this saying of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, you can't invent a new architecture every Monday, you know. So this system works, so you get in, you pass the doorman, and then you go to your staircase, you have a fountain in the middle, you look on the fountain, you look on the grass, you could do a party here, but the people are so elegant, they would never do a party. But they could do, and when you have a chance to doing that, or do it in your mind, it's always a good point. You have nice gardens here on the roofs. You have wooden shutters for the windows. This is again the backside of the Max Palais of the housing. You have a two-story door. You could look through if the door is not. I don't know where. It's too bright. The day is too bright. But this is the axis. This is a small place. These are housing projects which are of a little more moderate income. And this is a reverse shot when you look out and you refer to this church. You take up the symmetry with these two houses. Yeah, this is done by another architect, by a colleague, Otto Steidl, who died during the planning process. So this is a kind of a dialect between our office and our friend Otto Steidl. I worked for him as a student in my first job, so all comes again. This is now the south facing, the place facing the park. This is our Max Palais with this half symmetric and wild facade roof garden. And the developer said, okay, I want your strong, more classicistic approach, but I also want to have a modern building too. You know, there are two kinds of clients. So this is also a building done in plaster, but it has maisonette apartments. So we have these two, I have to offer two systems. You know, I can't offer one system in such a high, because he has a risk in not selling things, but finally he ended up very well. This is a detail of the Roccoforte Hotel. Again, you have granite as the base, which is very water consistent. You have the limestone, you have a structure, you have bronze windows. The user of architecture sees this detail and says in his back of his head, well, it works. You know, I have seen it before. I know it. I know the system. It's nothing new. Well, there's the third topic, Museum Barberini. It is a big problem for German cities that they looked quite nice before 1940, 1945. This is the center of Potsdam. We have the Schloss, we have the church by Schinkel, we have the Alte Markt. The car was not yet there, not like in America where we had a lot of cars already in the 30s. So it was a quite normal conservative situation. And in the second, and this Alte Markt had a very nice building. It was called the Barberini. You know, you must know that in the castle, the Schloss here, Frederick II, Frederick the Great lived, and he wanted to make Potsdam a kind of a Rome because he admired the Greek and the Italian, the Latin writers and architects. And he said, when I sit in my castle, I want to see a building which reminds me to Rome. He was never in Rome, nevertheless. So he sent an architect to Rome, and he made a drawing of the Palazzo Barberini by Bernini, and he redesigned that. You know, the Barberini has 7 bays, the Barberini has the sides sticking out, so it's a similar thing to the Barberini, and they built it only as facade. There are rooms behind, you have 2-floor rooms 8 meters high, but no one lived there of importance, so no military man or no churchman, no nobleman. It was just a facade, you know. And people loved that place. And that was the backside, you know. The Barberini had a staircase to the river, and it was a very cozy city. It was a very elegant city. And then came the Second World War. 2 weeks before the Second World War, the city was completely destroyed, and this is what's left over from the Barberini. So in the early 80s, the administrative people of Potsdam, which had torn down the castle, the Schloss, and the only buildings who were kept was this dome by Schinkel, which is you might know that this is a Tempietto of Bramante, just put on a box, you know. Wonderful, wonderful building, one of Schinkel's greatest buildings. So just the Schinkel and the Majory survived. The rest was just torn away, and they built this theater here on the floor of on the foundation of the Schloss, and this theater had no relation to anything which was here before, and also this university. So when the wall fell, a lot of people and the administrative people, the parliament, the city parliament of Potsdam decided that this plan should be applied. So this is a political decision which was started in 1990, so it's 32 years ago. And they said, we want to have the internal part, the inner part of Potsdam to be redone in a way with modern and old buildings that we have a center of the town again, you know. So this is the existing Schinkel Church. We want to have the Schloss to be rebuilt. We want to have the Alte Markt rebuilt. We want to have the Barberini rebuilt. And these red things survived, but we also want to have the Garnison Church rebuilt. We want to have the old block structure, and we even want this channel, which was built by Frederick the Great. We want to have that again, so that the big city of Potsdam, which has 180,000 inhabitants, has a center, a living Rome of its own again. And these plans take time. So the last buildings which are done now are these ones here. They are now under raw construction, so it took more than 30 years to find a client, to finance it, and so on and so on. The building I want to talk about is the Barberini, as it was seen as a key point of rebuilding Potsdam, and it was very hard to work on it because it was demanded. It has 3 floors of 8 meters high. What can you do with these buildings? You can say I make a University of Architecture in it, but it doesn't pay, you know. When we started the process, we got, I have to call it another way. There is a German Bill Gates, which name is Hasso Plattner. He has the software company SAP, you might know. And he said, I want to have this building. I put my private collection in it. Please make it. You have 3 years and 4 weeks time. We start today. Start up. That was the thing. Fortunately, we found a drawing in the archives of Potsdam, which were describing to the millimeter the section of the Baroque facade. We had a lot of photos, so with help of them, we could find what the antithesis of this column has been. And we had, this is a thing you will love, we had to make these models, these bozzettos of the detailed elements of the facade. You know, when you do this planning, you have photos, you have orientation, you make a drawing of this Corinthian capital, the height, the deeps, and so on. But then you have to stop and you have to give your drawings to Mr. Kretschmer. This is this gentleman here who then makes first a bozzetto in the scale 110, then a bozzetto in the model in the scale 1:3, and then in a full size in clay. And after that, you do a negative and then a positive again in gypsum. And this gypsum model is given to the stone factory. They scan it, they take it out of the stone, but the last 15 centimeters are done by hand. So in the final thing, you have, for example, 12 of these Corinthian capitals, which are all similar, but which are not identical, because the last 15 millimeters are done by hand. Yeah, and this is what came after 3 years and 4 weeks. We have a high-tech museum for changing exhibitions of the highest level. We have these 3 floors of 8 meters high. We have and we have, this is the reason for this photo, we have this Neue Markt again. We have the rebuilt Schloss where the Parliament of Brandenburg is now sitting. We have the obelisk, and wonderfully enough, the obelisk stands in the axis of the Majory. It stands in the axis of the Barberini. It stands in the axis of the Church of Schinkel, but it doesn't stay in the axis of the castle, of the Schloss. This is how the facade looks. As you might know, when you do a museum, you have to do it in concrete. It's not, all other things are not possible because there's a highest level of fire protection, and you put a facade in front of it, a facade of brick, and the brick construction is 24 to 36 centimeters thick, and you put all the limestone parts in it, and then you put plaster on it. So you have a self-bearing construction without joints, which you otherwise would have to apply. This is the backside with a small garden, and this is the historic exact reconstruction where we had photos. But these facades are facades which we had done, which has similarities to your faculty building. So this is not a historic building. This is a modern high-tech building with these facades referring to the Baroque facade. The reason is that these side wings were done in the mid of the 19th century, while this building was finished in 1782. So Frederick the Great had another 4 years to look at it. And this is a view from the helicopter. So the old market was redone as it was planned by the city authorities in 1990. This is the idea. Yet this is a key building which has the absolute best reconstruction of a facade. These are 2 other palazzos which Frederick the Great wanted, with Italian featuring. And these are modern buildings which have to refer exactly to the former city lines, which have a given proportion to the windows, which have a given percentage of plaster and windows. And these buildings were done by our, These buildings were done by our office too, these ones. They were built parallel. So this is the Barberini from the backside by helicopter. You have a big foundation where you have all the high climatization things in it. It's a very technical building, and this is the backside of the also historic facades. It's all, this is office and 50% housing looking over the river, and this is the Parliament building of Brandenburg. these are the modern houses we did in a very, how I say, moderate way. We have a profiled facade where you see on the second view, well, it's a modern building, but it's singing in the choir of the existing city. This is how it looks. This photo was taken last weekend, where I show you that the corner of the northwestern block is now under construction. So this building also will be an exact historic reproduction of a building of 1780. These are modern. So, but altogether, it's a chorus where the old center appears again. This is the entrance area of the Barberini. It's very precious with terrazzo. This is the staircase, which is on the same place where the old staircase was, with bronze. This is the 8-meter high central room of the Barberini, which had to be rebuilt. The city wanted this height to be seen from the place during the night. And this is one of the expositions Hasso-Plattner is giving. Every 3 months he opens a new exposition. It's a private run museum, and it's wonderful what he does to the city. And retrospective, you see the Barberini was built in the 18th century to house finally the Hasso-Plattner collection. This is it is an absolute fabulous museum, because he has an absolute new lighting technique for all the exposition. They repaint the colors to the color they want. They have a lighting, an overall lighting, which is LED, which gives a lighting in the color you want. So if you want a little blue in it, you get blue, and then every picture is lightened by a special light bulb here, and you can change the color too, so you can make the most out of the paintings. It's incredible. So you see a painting, and you see it hanging on the wall and say, hey, I haven't seen the painting, because it's in a new surrounding, Well, I have to hurry up. The last topic, the redesign, the rebuilding of the Berliner Schloss in cooperation with Franco Stella. That's the biggest project we did ever. It was nearly 700 million euro. And it's an interesting story, because it has a political dimension. This is again the plan. This is the Schloss. The Schloss was the first building of all the buildings you see here. The only exception was the Armory building here. It was started in the 15th century with the Renaissance, which turned later out to a Renaissance palace. And in the beginning of the 18th century, this Baroque thing was added. It's huge, 180 by 120 meters, by Schlüter, who was also a sculptor, And the great thing about the Schloss was that, as I said, the Linden, the big street running to west, refers to this entrance gate number 5. I made this, I put in the axis here in this aerial photography. So this is the museum island where Berlin started, where the Renaissance part, Gothic part, and this Baroque part of the Schloss is. You have here the yellow axis of the Linden, which runs to gate number 5. You have the axis of the Alte Nationalgalerie, which runs also on gate number 5, and you have the axis of the Altes Museum of Carl Friedrich von Schinkel, which runs on gate number 4. And so there's the saying that the whole city of Berlin refers to that building. This is now a shot taken from gate number 5, looking in the axis of the Alte Nationalgalerie. This is Unter den Linden, a wonderful painting of Friedrich Gärtner, where you see the effect that it's wonderful that a road runs to a facade and the facade is shifted on 15 degrees. This is what architects did in in the earlier times, they didn't plan toilets or things like that. They planned axes, you know. How is the city working? What axis do we have, you know? This is the facade looking south, and you see very much the Palladian idea, not so much the French castle of Louis XIV, which was the image of that time. He's referring on Palladio, who has these columns running over 2 floors, and he has this figure shaping to the sky, referring to Villa Rotonda. And the facade is wonderful because it's so Baroque. It's kind of symmetric, but it's also asymmetric, you know. And you have this big portal number 1, which is repeated just here, and then again you have a row of windows. So it's a kind of a informal formality. We have the facade is, as I said, 180 meters long, 35 meters high. It has 4 floors. The first floor was the floor, what you see here, where the kings really, and the emperors then lived. The Schloss was damaged in the Second World War, but after the Second World War, there were the first exhibitions to restart cultural life. And as it was in East Berlin, it was blown up in 1950. Also, it was a center, and it was a commitment, a political commitment of the communists to destroy it, because they said, well, we don't love the kings and the emperor of Germany, we blow it up. And it's a brutality which we have seen of IS in Northern Africa in the last years. When you blow up a work of art, you do other things too I don't want to mention, you know. And they built in 1970 this ugly Palast der Republik, which was mainly done a thing to make parades like in Moscow, where you can have military people parading up here and the nomenclatura sitting here. And then, well, that was the situation in the middle of Berlin. Also, the church is still there, the park is still there, the Altes Museum is there, the Unter den Linden is there. And then in 1990 came this nice gentleman, my friend Wilhelm von Bodin, who comes from Hamburg, and he's a salesman for agricultural machines, you know. And he say, I want a Schloss back. We can't have a situation like that. It's stupid. It's the middle of Berlin. Hey, come on, where are we? And he said, this is what it looks now when I look down the Unter den Linden. You know, here you have the Zeughaus of Schlüter, which was finished in 1705, a wonderful Baroque building, and we have another palace. And you look on that, isn't that ugly? You know, this could be how it looks. And he made this a publication of this facade. No one was interested because German reunification had other problems. So he said, well, I have to do it another way. And he built this full-size mock-up facade. He had people who lent him money, and the facade is 35 meters high. In this direction, it was 80 meters. He had to put a big mirror. He has seen that in Paris when the Madeleine was refurbished. And he said, well, people, look at that. That's how Berlin could be. I want the facades back. I don't want the internal part of the Schloss. I don't want a monarchy. I just want the beauty of the city. Please. And he did not apply mainly to architects, because architects rely on themselves. They say, I'm the center of the world, not an old architect 200, 300 years ago. But as he said, we have to rebuild it. There are so many buildings which have been rebuilt. You know the story of the Campanile on the Markusplatz in Venice, which was blown down by a wind in 1903. It was rebuilt exactly. This is another form of rebuilding. It's an abstract, you know, by Venturi and Rauch in the middle of the 60s in Philadelphia, the house of Benjamin Franklin. That was not the idea of us, but have you ever been to Barcelona? The rebuilding of the Barcelona pavilion, a wonderful thing. Everyone loves it. So why not rebuild the Berlin Schloss? And there's another thing which happened recently, but I have to show you. This was the middle of Frankfurt, you know. The ugliest building you can imagine, you know. Who has seen an uglier building? None of you. And what has been changed, looks it now. It was the idea of Christoph Meckler, a great architect, German architect, who said we have to have people back in the cities because the city is the home of people and not of ugly concrete halls for administration. You must know that you have underground parking here. These are modern building, concrete structure, it's fireproof, all that. But people love it and live there, you know, and people go there. And this was the idea of Wilhelm von Bodin. And there was a big conversation, struggle. And in 2002, the German Bundestag, the German parliament, decided with 2/3, there's a competition, the facades have to be rebuilt, and the rest is a state-run museum. And the winner of the competition was Franco Stella from Vicenza, where Palladio comes from. And as Franco is from the profession, he's an architect, he's a professor teaching Baroque urban design, and he is from the nature, he's from Italian Razionalismo. You know the paintings of Chirico, which is a kind of a form of an Italian Bauhaus, which to simplify it, refers much more to the classic architecture. And there's Aldo Rossi from Razionalismo, who built most of his work in Italy, not in Italy, but in Berlin. And he won the competition with this very simple design. You know, this is the old Schloss. This is the Renaissance part, which was said not to be rebuilt in the conditions of the competition. And this is a new design. So this facade north, this facade west, this facade south has to be rebuilt. The Schlüterhof, these 3 facades had to be rebuilt. And the blue part is the new. So he said, we make a new connection between the 2 portals, which was an open walkway. And as the programming for the building was so big, we cover the Eosanderhof. So the internal part of the Schloss is modern, but it refers, we still have the Schlüterhof, we have the referring to the facade, and in combination, it will work. So this is the section, we have the modern glass-covered so-called agora, we have the cupola, and we have inside the reconstructed facades. And this was a rendering which gives the new museum island, the Schloss, the garden, the Schinkel, the Alte Nationalgalerie. So this is the new center repaired like what we have seen in Potsdam. This is the north-south corridor, which he's referring in his competition, which are the Uffizis in Florence. And this was his idea, that we rebuilt the portal number 4. We see the axis running to the Schinkel. And we have a modern architecture in so-called architecture. It's a combination of concrete and limestone. We have an explicit modern design which is referring to the old architecture. This technique was used by IMP when he was refurbishing the Louvre. He didn't use the material which the Louvre was built out, the so-called limestone. And we have, I mean, building with this material is complicated, it's very expensive, but you can choose the color, which is a little brighter than this. You can choose the forms. The column has a similar size like that. You refer exactly to to the heights of the floor, and we make it absolutely symmetric. Also, we have 7 stories here and 4 stories here. So this was the courtyard of the Schlüter, which was the main entrance, the main staircase to the Renaissance palace. These were the renderings of the competitions. And then we formed a team, because he has never been building a bigger project in Germany, and we worked together. We are still working together since 2008. And this was the idea that every museum has a kind of a big entrance room where you have to impress people. You know, you come to a museum and you say, wow, I'm here. It's like you come to a cathedral. The first museum, the Altes Museum of Schinkel, has it. It has a rebuilding of the Pantheon in Rome. So this is the internal facade of the Portal number 3, which is a complete reconstruction. This is the modern technique of the Architekturbeton, the concrete in the mixture, in the combination of natural stone. So this is a room 30 by 30 by 30 meters, and we want to build that. So we had the highest possible environment standards in the year 2010. We have the heating with geothermal energy. We have the best possible insulation. We have so-called box windows, so 2 windows in a distance of 40 centimeters. We built the house in a way that you can change it without changing the concrete construction. We have a raised floor everywhere, so we can put in new systems, and that was the biggest saving point. We reused the existing foundation of the Palast der Republik. And when you do a building like that, you must build a mock-up facade, full size, with all the original materials, just to test everything you thought about is working. So you might see that all the natural limestone things we have here had to be redone in the way Mr. Kretschmer did. So we built bozzettos, and all together we built 285 bozzettos, different bozzettos for the different motifs, and we all have together 17,000 pieces of limestone, which all arrived in time. I am very proud of that. So this is the construction. We have a concrete construction like the Barberini. We have a brick wall which is 60 centimeters wide. We have the limestone which is then put up in situ. We have the complicated windows, and this is, it looks very much like in paintings of Karl Friedrich von Schinkel, where he shows building up the Acropolis, when this brick construction is raising. As in the original, we have columns which are completely done in limestone. We have columns which are completely done in a kind of a round brick. We have details like that on the construction side, where you really feel, what can an architect do? You know, this photo, it shows the stage 2 years before inauguration, when the flooring of the courtyard is not yet done. Here, this part of the facade is already finished. You have plaster. We have the brick layers, which is not, where the plaster is not on. And well, this is one of the wonderful 1-3 bozzettos of a setback of 3 meters, with the sculpture here, which is, he was very proud. And that after that, a full-size model was built in plaster. And this is how it looks now. You know, it looks very easy. It's light, but in reality, it's very hard work. These combination of sculpturing and solid brick construction, which base on each other. Just to give you an impression how precise the work was, this is showing a sculpture of the so-called Borasche, that was a kind of a goddess. And we know that the sculpture which was staying there, here's a photo of 1930, the sculpture had a Bernini in mind, which he saw in Rome, and he did a kind of a copy of that. And all that had to be redone. And after 10 years of constructing it, the thing was ready. Yeah, we're very proud. It's now staying there like the model which Wilhelm von Bodin put up in 1994, 35 meters high. We have the cupola, which was designed in the mid of the 19th century, which is a kind of addiction, because the King Friedrich Wilhelm IV was a very pietistic man. He had a big chapel here. And this is the Agora now, which we proposed. You ask, why do you have this ugly thing here inside? Yeah, the question was good, thank you. The thing is that the client was a very wise man. He's the man who calculated, Mr. Rettig. He had to calculate how much does it cost to shift the capital from Bonn to Berlin. He had a good team, and he calculated 41.5 billion Deutschmark. And how much did it cost? 41 billion. So he's a very precise, he's a good guy. And he said, well, we have to put some new thing in. Otherwise, they tell us this is only a very dusty thing for white old men. And we can take it out later. So this is why he put this modern computer thing in it. And in the beginning, I hated it, but I see how good Mr. Rettig is. And sometimes we'll take it out, and I accept it. You have to accept it. You are not, the client is the boss, not you. Sometimes we architects think we are the boss, but it's not the case. This is the reverse shot, the huge Roman triumph arch, 30 meters high. You can have great conferences there. You can sit here, about 2,000 people. You have excellent acoustics. This is the most complicated interior space we ever did with climatization and so on. This was open in earlier times. You can imagine. This is the biggest glass plate ever mounted in Germany, fireproof and so on. So high tech. This is the courtyard now, the Schlüterhof, where you see the axis on the Alte Nationalgalerie, and people just love it because Berlin has now its center. You know, you have restaurants there. I go there every day. I just live very near. I have to confess. This is the corner. We go now round the building. This is the corner southwest. This is the long facade stretching, the so-called city facades looking south. We have no external shading. That's all inside. It would be too dangerous with the nowadays wind. This is the courtyard. This is the north facade. This is it's seen very problematic, but we were clearly said in the competition, make a modern facade to the east. You cannot make a Baroque facade. And it's difficult enough to cope with this Baroque system. You can't make a normal plaster facade with plastic windows. So this is a very rationalismo facade, very deep, 1.5 meters are the windows back in here. It's very technical, although you don't see it because the water is going down in the inside of the facade. And it shows here, I'm a modern building, but I'm the small brother of the Baroque Schloss. This is the corridor running north-south, which I showed you before. So these columns refer on that. We have 7 floors here, 4 floors there. It's very precious. Yeah, you have 2 layers. It's clearly modern. This is the internal thing of the museum. The museum is not made for a special exposition like for Egyptians or classic paintings. It's a museum which can change its content. So it's very neutral. We proposed wooden floors. The clients wanted that plastic stuff. This is also a thing you have to accept. We have 39,000 square meters of exposition. It's half the size of the Louvre. Very, very big. This is the staircase, very neutral, very sober, as a contrast to the exterior. These are the costs. We calculated the costs, and the costs are still fitting. So the whole cost was 680 millions. The modern part, the basement, that was paid by the German government, you know. It's 100,000 square meters, so the square meter costed 5,600 euro, which is not very precious. The historic facade, 707 meters long, and the cupola costed 120 millions. And this money was raised by Wilhelm von Bodin. He said, I will get it, I will manage it. It was said Henry Kissinger gave 25 million. So that's not a joke. But when you see the overall costs, 238 millions are for technical parts, so 35% is technical. So the historic part, the nice bright facade is only 18%. So you see again, the beauty is a thing which is easy to reach. The technical things are double the sum of the facades. Astonishing. Well, this is the head of the cupola, which was designed in 1845 for this chapel, which is under the cupola. And these are 8 angels. They are the same. It's design of one figure, and they just have different arms, and they have different symbols wearing. And this is the day when the cupola, this part on the cupola was lifted. You know, this is all done in bronze. This is all. Every part is formed by a sculpture with bozzetto and all that thing. And in the very end, I can tell you this construction costed only 2.6 million euro in fabrication, which is not a lot when you see the amount of beauty, but the design costs for that were more than 1 million. You know, the ratio from design costs to what you get higher and higher as more complicated it is. And it was a wonderful day. There came a crane, wonderful story, in the 6 o'clock in the morning, which is 4 meters high. And 4 hours later, the crane was 100 meters high. And it took till the evening till they finished mounting the head. And exactly to the minute of sunset, this thing was set on the cupola and the Schloss was finished. Very proud we are. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was truly inspirational. I can tell from last week that you had 12 new fans. I can hopefully speak for the whole auditorium now that everybody is just in awe of what you do, and your passion is contagious. And so we are very thankful you're here, and that was fantastic. So I hope there's tons of questions, and maybe if you all, I know you can go on for a few more hours, but maybe some questions from the auditorium or from online.
Or critic.
Or comments, yes.
Yes, go ahead.
So during the reconstruction process, why did you choose to change the style and the material from the original design?
The historic facades are made to the centimeter, to the historic ones. So that we had an exact, you know, there were 8,000 photos of the facades, and there was a team of architects who worked for 10 years to take out from the historic photos the exact shape of the facades. And the facades are not regular. The Baroque seems to be a regular building, but in reality it's very irregular. So the historic facades are an exact copy. We do not believe, and we couldn't finish the exterior of the Schloss in the way the old Schloss was done, because that would be a falsification. On the first thing, the new Schloss is inside much bigger. It has much more floor area. It has 30% more floor area than the historic one. And we wanted to say, and the client wanted it also in the competition, what is new, I mean, everything is new, but what is reconstructed and what is not reconstructed. They wanted a clear division. And that was all the finalists in the competitions did. So, and it was explicitly said, you don't have to reconstruct, you cannot reconstruct the Renaissance part. So there was from the beginning the thing, you built a building old and new. So that was the precondition of the client. Please.
So I work on the reconstructed structures with the Princess Foundation, and with the summer school in 97. And I remember there was a little street there was a little material which was still there, which was safe. Like, I don't know how it was safe, but all the sculpture was safe somewhere. And I was just wondering what is the percentage of this archaeological or this material which has survived the destruction, which was going into the...
Yeah, that's a good question. Unfortunately, only 81 pieces, 80 so-called spolies, could be reduced for the Schloss. So when we have 17,000 parts of limestone, only 81 are original. When you see the reconstruction of the Frauenkirche in Dresden, the part of the spolies was about 30%. At the Barberini, we had nothing, no single thing, because the East German government was keen of destruction. And it was partly saved by civil persons, you know, enthusiasts or architects. But all the 81 parts we had, they were built in. I could show it you on the photos, but we have to roll back. And do you want? But it's disturbing when you see. But I can show it exactly. For example, in the Agora, when you see here. Could you lower the light, please? So this dark part, this is a part of the lady. This is original. Then this upper part of the Capitol here. No, this upper part, this upper part, this upper part, and these two pieces here, and this dark. They are quite dark. We didn't sandblast them because they have dignity, but it's, as you see here, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parts in this huge facade. It's very little, unfortunate. But we did what we could. Next question, please go ahead.
Having so much experience doing both, the spirit modern or modernist,
yeah,
and the old Baroque classicism, what are your personal and theoretical reflections on both architecture?
Oh, it's a good question. I think when you have the task of reconstruct it, it's a wonderful thing, because as more as you work in the system, as more you understand the greatness of our colleagues of the 18th century or the century where the building was built. So I have the feeling that's true. That's not. I'm not fishing for compliments. That these colleagues had much more experience in proportion, in design, in beauty, and material than we have today, you know. So we love to do that. We did altogether 3. There's another third project which I didn't show you. We do the reconstruction of the Garnisonkirche. This is a Baroque church, also from the 18th century, 90 meters high. But you can't compare that to that buildings we do normally. We normally do housing, we do hotels. We have complete different cost structures. I mean, you have seen here, this is a modern building, you know. 88% of this building is modern, and the historic or the reconstruction parts, the facade which was done here is the most costly facade ever done in Germany. It costs 4,500 euros per square meter. Without windows, it's without windows. The housing projects we do normally, they cost a tenth of it, you know. So it's completely different, and we love to take details, axes, and architectural thinking, which is very much based, I would say, on the principles of Baron Haussmann from Paris. But it's a two ways of music. It's like Arvo Pärt and Mozart, you know. We are doing the Arvo Pärt things normally for the housing, repeating, simplifying, and this is the Mozart, you know. So we are happy enough to work in both fields, but we know that the field of reconstruction is a very rare thing which a private person, with the exception of Hasso-Plattner, cannot pay. It's not payable. And but when you ask for the orientation, we are in our normal buildings, we are referring to the logic of Baron Haussmann and to Leon Krier, who is a close friend, and well, that's the style we think is ours. Please.
So I also remember from time ago when Bosnian was using the promotion,
Yeah.
this campaign about the program. So what's happening with building? Because I remember there were discussions that there were like commercial center, galleria. You haven't mentioned why what is the building used now for what are the functions, because it's such a big space program, and how is it divided and how is it managed?
Yeah, I left it. You're right, because I didn't have that. It's a very good question. You know, we have 100,000 square meter of space, you know, and in this space we have nearly 40,000 square meter of exhibition space. We have 10,000 square meter of restaurants. We have 15,000 of administration, and the rest is just technique and staircases. So when you do a rebuilding, you start, I have the dimensions of the buildings, and I can put maximum inside this and this and that size, and there was 100,000. And then the government had, or the people who run it, who are the state-run museums, what can we put inside? So you do the question on a reverse track than normally. And they said, okay, we will take the museums which are in Dahlem in the south of Berlin and put them in here, and maybe if that doesn't run, if people don't like it after 20 years, we change it. So the building is built in a way you could make an exposition of cars in it, for example. You know, we have elevators of that size. We could use, we could put 1.5 tons per square meter. So the state was extremely flexible just to make it possible to the facades to be rebuilt. Normally, when you build a museum, they say we want that, that, and that, and that is the foundation of the design. And here it was reverse. So it is not private, it is public, it is restaurant, it's exposition, and this area, what you see here, can also be used for conferences, like the Vienna conferences, which are taken in the Hofburg, in referring to the Peace of Vienna of 1815. So these are the functions we have. The conference center here is 6,000 square meter, and it's all run by the government. You can rent it privately. I was in a committee who wanted to celebrate the 80th birthday of Hans Stimmann, the great Senatsbaudirektor in the 90s. And we could have rented it, but then came COVID. So it is a state-run building. It has a public function. It is open. It is free entry. It houses the collections which Alexander von Humboldt collected in the beginning of the 19th century of South America, of Polynesia, of Asia. But it's not a fixed thing. You know, the Louvre also changes its content, and well, that's a brief description of what's inside. Please.
I'm interested to know if after this experience, both technically and artistically, with the Schloss, whether it would have any impact on the way you might design your next new building.
Yeah, I mean, the wonderful thing of these huge structures is that you can do every detail you want, and as you use it so often, the price is sinking rapidly, you know. We have 700 of these complicated windows. If you would build one window, it would cost $1 million. When you build 700, it costs only 80,000. So the lesson you learn is that you say, let's concentrate in one point of a nice detail, which might be costly, but as it is only in the focal point of the public, and everyone who enters the housing project, for example, has to pass this detail. Let's make that as precious as it is, and it enlarges the value, the optical value for everyone. That's the lesson we learn. The rest, the technical things in here are so complicated, you couldn't explain them to non-architects. It's so different, it's so different. Please.
So now there are so many extremely outstanding construction projects. What is the impact on the German craftsmanship? Because this project obviously requires so much massive craftsmanship and typology, also like Dresden and Potsdam. Has it changed the landscape of building operations and education? So where are the people? What do you learn?
It's a very good friend. The Mr. Kretschmer, which you have seen, who's a friend now, he is a trained sculptor, and most of the guys who do these bozzetti come from East Germany, because in the East German art academies, art was taught primarily in naturalism. So it's not Joseph Beuys, who was in a Western academy, where it's like, you know, Matteuer or Tübke, these representative of East German art understanding, they were much more in naturalism. So there was a trained group of, or there is a trained group of sculptors who were taught in classic forming. And without these guys, we couldn't have done that. And they were existing within East Germany, astonishingly enough, although in East Germany a very low rate of reconstruction was done. And funnily enough, the industry had enough people to cope with this amount of work. Although you must understand that when you order 17,000 handmade pieces of limestone, you must order them at least 2 years in advance to be there in time. But as there are, you know, Germans love craftsmanship, and it was mostly done by German craftsmen. There was a certain percentage of Polish and a certain percentage of British sculptures, but most was done in Germany. And as I mentioned, in the year 2010, the limestone firm Bamberger, they invented the KUKA robot, which is able to cut out a capital. It sounds easy. In reality, it's very complicated, and that reduced the cost of a capital, you know, which is 3 by 3 meters, 2 meters high. When it's done by hand, it would cost 450,000, and by this KUKA robot, it costs, let's say, 250. So it's also technology. But as I say, the last 15 millimeters must done by hand. It's a combination. Yeah, it's a combination. Please.
Yeah, very nice talk.
Thank you.
What I really appreciated about the talk was the dedication to the heroic and aesthetic aspects of architecture, but also to the technical and the financial. And the two came into a very elegant balance. I think it was a very instructive thing for our students to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Please.
Could you elaborate more on your philosophy about, I guess, the concern for falsification? It seems contradictory to me that you pay such reference to the reconstruction of an exterior down to the centimeter of the historic building, and then believe that any other additions would be falsifications. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You know, when you occupy yourself, then you read about reconstruction. You know, the first building which was reconstruction was asking you, when do you think the first building in this world was reconstructed? Any belief? 3rd century before Christ, a temple in Delphi of the 6th century burned down. 300 years later, it was reconstructed. The reconstruction says you can only reconstruct when you know how the building before looked. You must do an exact reconstruction. You must have a photo or a plan or something. And in the 19th century, I just say voilà le duc. Yeah, a lot of things were reconstructed and overdone. You know, in Germany, other countries too, but this is an example I know. There was built a Mediterranean castle, or Neuschwanstein, 19th century, which said, well, I'm from the 15th century, but in reality, it's a steel construction. And so there's a fine line not also in art history, but also in the German intellectuals, that there's reconstruction which you can do, but what you not can do is turn on the talk of 1750 and apply it directly to a modern building. You must have the division of what is old and what is new. That is an intellectual, let's say, prelimit, which was given to us also by the client, you know. And there was a lot of massive political attack on us when we did that, you know. We were called everything you can imagine, yeah. And mostly the architects were against this project. They said, you are fascist, you da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And now they say, well, it's not bad, Thomas, they'll do their job. Yeah. So, and this critic and this danger comes from the intellectual line, what is old and what is new. Because in the 19th century, there was so many buildings. I mean, in reality, it's always a mixture. You know, the dome of the Cologne Cathedral started in the 14th century, stopped 80 years later, taken up 1817, finished in 1888. Concrete, steel, all in that. In reality, it's a mixture. But nowadays they say you can only reconstruct what we know, and the new must be seen as a new. And that was what the client also asked, because they said, if this would be, the mixture would be too big, we couldn't get the project through. And there's one other aspect. You know, in France, you have the Grand Projet d'État. The German chancellor comes to France, and every 5 years, hey, we have a new thing. We have Centre Pompidou, new Louvre, très grande bibliothèque. And these Grand Projet d'État, this is the first Grand Projet d'État in Germany, they must base on a certain consensus of the society. And Mr. Rettig, the client, he said, we must keep that in order to fulfill my and the client's wish. And this was the line given to us. It might sound illogic, but in reality, you know, the client is everything. You can argue with him, you can convince him, you can show him things, but in the end he says, I take solution C and not B. Vittorio.
Thank you, Thomas, for the whole lecture and the glimpses that you realize you are great word. My question is, fundamentally, is one thing. You have shown us that when you look at a building, you think at the beginning like an organist. You ask yourself, how can it fit the context? So this is, if you want, the spatial dimension of whole and part. In the case of the castle, you have the temporal dimension of whole and part, because what you're doing in the modern art must also fit with what was originally there 250 years ago, or 300 years ago. So you need always between the concrete decision for something and a vision of the whole of the city and of the development of architecture. And one question I have is, what I remember many conversations, Thomas and I have known each other for 8 years. Very close friends. I do something very, very different. But philosophy has some similarities with architecture. I will put things together. And one thing that I remember you explained to me already as a student, when I said, well, Baroque seems so excessive reconstructed facade and not on the modern facade. Have to do with the fact that there are certain patterns that are universal in the various efforts, and that there is a deep connection between modern architecture and 18th century Baroque architecture.
Yeah. It's a difficult question. You know, this castle was the most precious part, the most precious thing the state of Prussia ever built. So it was not, this is why it was for us, or for Germany, the most costly facade, and for Prussia it was also, in the beginning of the 18th century, the most precious thing they could do. And you must know that Schlüter, the architect of the building, it's not the other one, it's the pupil of Schinkel. He was also a sculptor, like Bernini or Michelangelo, you know. So he was a sculptor and an architect. So this building he built is exceptional even for Baroque age. And this is also a reason why it was reconstructed. It is normal. It's not a normal Baroque military thing or housing project like the buildings south of Versailles, where the people who serving the palace are housed. So there are certain patterns in architecture, in order, in symmetry, in thinking, but as this building consists of so many sculptures and so many effects, it's difficult to transfer it, or it's more difficult to transfer it to modern architecture, because modern architecture, unfortunately, does not have the connection between sculpture and architecture. So that was a thing the Bauhaus finished. Unfortunately, we miss it, you know, well, this makes the relation complicated, but the rest, the structuring of buildings has similarities, but there are these similarities also in Renaissance or in Gothic or in Roman architecture. I think the most influential part for me as a practicing architect is the Roman architecture, the Roman city, the Roman, also the Roman urban design, you know, the main street, the small street, the block. Was that a sufficient answer? Please.
One comment and one question.
Yeah.
One thing that I find delightful in architecture that you're practicing that you say is modern is that the closer I am to the building, the more rewarded I am. The more rewarded. We spoke many times of how human, even monumental buildings are, that the way you carve limestone and one touch it, or even the fountains you add in, it's still very human.
Yeah.
While, as you mentioned, it starts at the urban scale, you're grabbing axes across cities, it's still very much, it's fractal down to when I'm standing right next to it, I experience it more richly. And that I find incredibly inspiring. My question is, I noticed in the Barberini Museum, in the original, the pediments over the windows were alternating in pattern with triangular and then arcuated pediments, but in the reconstruction, it was changed.
The pediments, what is it?
The pediments over the windows on either side. I wanted to learn a little more about that.
As I know, the image, the facade of the Barberini is exactly what we have on photos. We didn't change anything. There was only one change. We had to have an elevator where an art transport can go in. You know, when you have a very precious painting, it's closed in a container, and the container is on a truck, and the truck goes in, and we had to integrate this door in the Baroque facade. But the rest was exactly the same. I mean, from the facade facing the Alte Markt. The wings, the modern wings, the side wings, that was a thing we designed ourselves.
Can we go practice?
Yeah. Just say stop when we are at the. Oh, it's terrible, this thing. Now we come closer. This one?
The left has, is it the same?
Yeah, that's exactly reconstructed.
Well, I should pay more attention.
This is a new thing. No problem. This is a new thing, and a thing what was changed was that these windows were enlarged to doors. And in earlier times, in the beginning of the 20th century, this window was a door, and this was a window and a window. That was the change we made. Okay. Any more questions? Critics?
Thank you, Thomas.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming.